The Nintendo 64 is absolutely loaded when it comes to classic racing games to play. Whether your style be arcade or simulation, there is something for you. Not only that, but the sheer amount of vehicles for you to race with covers pretty much everything from your standard cars to weird and wonderful sci-fi futuristic creations. And so for today's video we're taking a look at the console's two-wheeled racing games to satisfy your biker needs. And so in the comments below let me know which one you think is the best to play, and you never know, you may just be helping another gamer find their next gaming fix for the weekend. As always, if you want a full review rather than the overview that I'll be giving you, just head on down to the description box where I'll link you up to all of today's featured games full reviews which I've completed over the years. When it comes to motorbike games, the first one which always comes to mind, for me anyway, is Road Rash. I've countless memories of playing it on the Sega Mega Drive way back in the day, and bashing the crap out of opponents whilst racing just felt so satisfying. My personal favourite in the series is on the ill-fated Panasonic 3DO, which is a shame because the console was absolutely panned, and to have the best entry in the series on a console very few people played is a tragedy. Developed by Pacific Coast Power and Light and published by THQ in the year 1999 came Road Rash 64. The franchise made its one and only entry on the N64 with a game which has a cult following, and many people consider this one of the best combat races on the system. For me, the most memorable thing about the game was the licensed music tracks, which feature the likes of Sugar Ray and the Mermen, which wasn't really something we got much of on the kart-based console. But the average reviews on its release were mostly down to the graphics, which many reviewers of the time felt were below average. There is support for the expansion pack, which gives you the option of a high-res mode, but like almost all games that give you this option, it does come at a hit to the frame rate. Still, the letterbox and widescreen modes do make the game look more appealing, and the expansion pack I think is a must when it comes to multiplayer, which is where the game really comes to life. As a single player game you have your standard experience where you must win races, upgrade your bike and avoid being busted by the cops. As a multiplayer game though, it becomes a lot more fun, as nothing can beat the sense of fun you're going to get from battling your friends as you compete for that podium spot. Many people mistakenly think that this game is just a 64-bit version of Road Rash 3D from the PlayStation, but whilst that game emphasised the racing aspect, Road Rash 64 is a much more combat-centric experience. And so with a host of weapons, some awesome bikes and an experience which is overall good fun, it's hard not to recommend Road Rash 64 to pretty much anyone, despite it having some major flaws. Extreme G was for many people their earliest high-speed racing experience on the console. I remember telling my friend how fast the swoop bike level was on Star Wars on the console, and he lent me Extreme G saying it didn't even come close to how quick this game was. Developed by Probe and published by Acclaim in 1997, it was definitely one of the more enjoyable and unique early N64 experiences, and one which many people consider to still be the best in the series. If you've never played the game before, then think of the light cycles from the movie Tron and you won't go far wrong. You just start off by choosing a futuristic bike, blast around Wipeout style tracks which feature gravity defying twists and turns, and hold your vomit bag if you suffer from motion sickness, because this game really whipped you around its many tracks. The game went through its development cycle under the working title of Ultimate Racer. Whilst the end result is definitely not the ultimate racing experience, it is definitely one of the more enjoyable. For me, however, this is best enjoyed as a single player game. There's a solid cup-based system and secret bikes to unlock, but the game works best if you do some track memorization. As a multiplayer experience, if you have friends who are new to the game or relatives who don't play often, then it's really not a game which they can pick up and play. In multiplayer mode, the reduced screen real estate makes it hard to play, as you'd need cat-like reflexes to stand any chance. With some great visuals for the time it was released, solid controls and a fantastic sense of speed, which was only bettered by a few later games on the console, then Extreme G is a must-own for any racing game fan, especially given how cheap and easy this one is to pick up. Trust EA Sports to pump out a game for some quick cash when something has a sudden surge in popularity. With the extreme sports boost there was in the late 90s, EA Sports published and developed a game which was developed by MBL Research. The high-res mode with the expansion pack makes the licensed bikes and real stadium courses really stand out, and with a whole host of tricks to learn, you can spend quite a lot of time in the game's free play mode just working on your skills before hitting the races. The tracks feature real wear down, which means every lap you race should feel slightly different as the environments change slightly, which gives a great sense of realism, and also the bike physics are fairly accurate too for any piston heads. With play-by-play commentary, real bikers to choose from, and multiplayer support, it's definitely an enjoyable game to play, but it does feel like an out-and-out EA game. So if you're a fan of their other games, then you'll probably enjoy this, but it just feels so artificial at times. My recommendation for this game would be to play the single-player 16-course season mode, and if you enjoy the game after that, then you'll probably want to carry on playing. But for most people, I think this is a kind of one play and done experience. Perhaps what will be many people's favourite game on this list will be Excitebike 64 from Nintendo, which was released in the US and Japan in the year 2000. Developed by Left Field Productions, who are better known as the developers for the awesome NBA Courtside series, this revival of the classic Excitebike series was extremely well received. IGN for one noted the game's excellent graphics, fantastic 3D engine and delightfully realistic physics. But many people will remember the fact the game had an endless desert which was generated as you raced, and it allowed the configuration to be kept in the console's memory, which meant you could return to any part you had been to race at. For me, however, the biggest problem was that this was one of the last games released on the N64 in Europe, arriving a whole year after the Japanese and North American versions. The reason for this was that Nintendo of Europe were really struggling to keep up with the demand for Pokemon and Perfect Dark carts, and they were worried that releasing Excitebike 64 at the time, as the rest of the world did, it would cause further supply issues for those two previously mentioned games, especially because they were selling phenomenally well. All in all though, it's a good effort. The courses are perhaps my favourite of any of the biker games on the console, and there's a whole host of game modes to keep single players and multiplayer experiences going for many months. The soccer mode should be noted to anyone who enjoys a good crossover. Not to be confused with Supercross 2000, Jeremy McGrath's Supercross 2000 arrived via Acclaim, and like EA's effort, it kind of falls into the abyss in this day and age. It features 8 stadia tracks and 8 outdoor tracks, but most memorable is the pretty decent track builder, which allows you to make your own courses, which gives the game an endless amount of fun if you do get into it. Look, there's really not a whole lot to say about this one. It's a fairly solid but limited experience, and it's the kind of game you might still find cheap, play it once, but I doubt many people will be returning to it long after completing the single player mode. The multiplayer mode though is also weak, and unless you have a friend who's at the same ability level, you'll find that the races turn into a pretty one-sided affair. The game overall supports the expansion pack, and this is one of the game examples where you can find expansion pack enabled facilities, but it comes without a massive drop in frame rate in order to get the visual bump, so it's maybe worth playing even if it's just to take some glamour shots. After becoming a financial success for Acclaim, it's no surprise given their business model that a sequel was quickly put into production. Fans and the press were both looking forward to seeing what Acclaim would release next after the developer had more time to get to grips with the hardware and see what new features they could push into the follow-up. Sadly, I think few would say that they were satisfied by what was eventually delivered. Whilst the game took steps forward with its handling and track design, which helped you keep your speed up, it took more steps back with its overly filtered graphics and frame rate, which is all over the place, let's be honest. As strange as it may seem, they really do feel like different games, despite being in the same series. If you're playing on your own, then I'd probably say Extreme G is the better of the two games, and if you're thinking of multiplayer, then XG2 is the way to go, but perhaps let me know in the comments which of the two was your personal favourite. One thing I would recommend to anyone though is that before starting the championship mode in this game, get yourself over to the arcade mode, which is similar to F-Zero X's Death Race, where you'll get to grips with the game's arsenal of weapons, which is crucial in this sequel, which I feel has a much more combat based setup than the first entry in the series. Finishing off our roundup for today comes one of my personal favourites, which is Top Gear Hyperbike. Now look, you know that aside from Top Gear Rally, I pretty much love the Top Gear series on N64, and this entry is a direct follow-up to Top Gear Overdrive and features an enhanced version of the same game engine. Speaking of engines, the sound effects for the bikes here were all recorded in various bike dealerships, and so there's a good level of realism in the way that the game sounds, which is perhaps its biggest strength. As a game though, it's very fun to play and I enjoy it, but I expect that many of you will feel this one is actually more mediocre. There's only a handful of tracks, but thankfully it does have a decent track editor, so you can also make your own, which greatly extends the life of this title. I'm a big fan of Snowblind Studios, and this was their last entry on the N64 before they abandoned Nintendo consoles and later went on to work on the awesome Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance on the PlayStation and Xbox. In a way, this one is actually one of the more pure straight racers of the motorcycle games on the system. Like Top Gear Overdrive, one thing I enjoyed about this game is that there are secret shortcuts, and so it adds a level of exploration which you know is something that always piques my interest in a racing game. With 4 of the games on this list all arriving within a few short months of one another, it must have been really tough for anyone to decide which one to get, and in a way, they would have likely burnt out anyone who's looking for a racing experience with so many titles arriving at the same time. But without that pressure, there's now an option to return to play these titles and maybe see which one works best for you. So we've covered a whole host of games here, and in a weird and wonderful way there's actually more games that I could have added to the list, like Razor Freestyle Scooter, maybe even Paperboy, and perhaps even Forsaken, but they don't quite fit the theme that I was going for here, which was more of a straight racing experience. And so let me know down below which you think makes the perfect motorbike racing game. Is it having awesome graphics, track editors, realistic bike physics, franchises? Is it having all of the sponsorship and correct racers? I don't know. Let me know down below, and until next time.